Dwayne mentioned, I'm Ryan Monday, and I'm the design lead for the HoloLens Showcase team, which we'll talk a little bit about. First of all, I want to thank everyone for coming out today. Awesome showing. I think this is the biggest crowd we've had to date. Amazing. Awesome. It's great to see everyone excited about developing for augmented reality and the HoloLens. So the title of my talk is about Galaxy Shield, which is a project I was doing in my spare time. And I'm going to go in a little depth on the actual process I used to develop and kind of why I decided to tackle this project. So first of all, I'm going to start with a little on my background. I get a lot of questions about that, especially when I'm mentoring at the Academy. People are curious, what kind of skill set does it take to develop a holographic game? Then I am actually going to talk about my theory behind developing a project and kind of how I approach it. Projects are huge, complex things to tackle. And then I'm going to go into the exploration part, which is a lot of my findings while developing for the HoloLens. And then hopefully we'll have about 20 or so minutes for Q&A. Always love questions, and I actually tricked some Microsoft programmers to come. Got you. So first of all, what is HoloLens Showcase? We have tons of huge enterprise companies come to us trying to figure out how AR fits in their business model. And we oftentimes find that it saves a lot of money, it saves production, and it gives them an advantage versus their competitors because they could iterate on stuff much faster. So what I do is I like to consider myself a consultant or enabler. So we have these huge businesses come, and our team links them to agencies that work. And normally we help foster the project for the first 3 months during a proof of concept, and we help build out what will actually work for them on the HoloLens. Now I'm sure most of you guys have seen the partner video that was released at Build about 3 months ago. However, the Windows Partner Conference is currently going on, and this is the other side actually talking about the agencies and the products they're making. So that's just some of the mini projects we're currently working on. As you can see, it's a pretty exciting time to be a developer in this space. There's so many different possibilities, and we're just starting to find all the possibilities. So that's great. I was going to talk about this, but what about my actual background? Well, I come with about 15 years of game development. I started out early in high school. Started out as an art contractor, and then I've kind of done many different spots in development over that 15 years. So I started out as an environment artist, and then that got me interested in actually getting models in an engine. And I found the next thing to be effective as an environment artist is you need to figure out how to present them well. So then I got into being lighting artist for several different games. And then, of course, we all love design games. So I started switching over to work on design, which I had a lot of fun with. But again, being an effective designer, I also need to understand the engine I'm working with and what is actually possible. So I got into level scripting. About 8 years ago, I would compare it now to a junior software engineer. You have many different scripting languages like C# today that are extremely easy and they manage all the hard stuff for you. And then this is important for my current role. During my time at HUGR, which I'm sure most of you have heard of, I've done a lot of business development and evangelism. And I find that makes it really effective when I'm dealing with these bigger companies, just that kind of background. But at the end of the day, I wrap this all into being a technical artist. Now you may hear that term a lot. Technical artist is a pretty confusing term. When I hear it, I'm even confused on what companies are considering a technical artist. In general, we consider ourselves generalists. So we're the master of nothing, but we understand a bunch of different aspects of the development pipeline, and that makes us effective on a team. And then lastly, the roles differ per company, and this is part of why it's so confusing on what a technical artist is. So some companies have just animation riggers. They work on these advanced IK systems for next-gen cinematics where you start dealing with muscle deformation or advanced morphing for facial image. And then another one is particle effects. And this is a big one because if anyone's tried to do particle effects before as an artist, systems are pretty advanced. It's easy to break performance, and you need to know a little bit 3D math sometimes to actually achieve the effects you want to achieve. Then you have your shader specialists, which I'm going to talk about shader optimization today, but there's the other side of the fence for the next-gen consoles. And these are shader artists that are actually working on advanced PBR, realistic materials in a runtime environment. And then you have art optimization. Every technical artist goes through this. As a technical art director in the past, I have my art director that comes up with these wacky, crazy ideas, has this vision that would never run. So it's my job to actually make it work or figure out what's possible and still make him happy that he achieved his vision. And then you have your pipeline tools. I'm sure there's mostly engineers in today. So engineers make great systems, but they always don't make the best tools. And when they hand a system over to the artist and it's not usable, it's kind of an issue. So as a technical artist, it's my job to communicate with the engineer and actually figure out how to make tools that are effective for the artist. Also, some technical artists are more programmer that understand art, and then I'm in this camp where I actually started out as an artist and started learning programming. At the end of the day, I like to think of it like this. You've got your left side of the brain, which you equate to your engineers, your technical designers. Then you have the artists that are running around the halls like lost puppies. And then technical artists are the bridge between that kind of help bridge that gap between, I guess, those two theories. Also, I like to consider myself a peacekeeper sometimes. I'm not sure how many work in a development studio, but things could get pretty heated between those two camps. All right, so let's get started on fundamentals of how I develop a project. First of all, developing a project is extremely overwhelming, especially when you're doing one by yourself, like I'm doing currently. It's never a straightforward process. You constantly run into different challenges along the way. There's always something that's a showstopper, and time estimates never end up meeting what you would expect. And then this increases when you add things like the HoloLens or augmented reality, which are completely new. So because of this, it's easy to lose sight. I see a lot of people, especially engineers, sometimes they want to make a game, but then they start with making an engine, and then they spend 2 years on that engine and completely forget about the game they originally wanted to make. So with that said, I'm glad no one's left yet, because there are some advantages. First of all, I do it to learn and grow, especially with this new AR space, new devices. I find it the most effective way. For me, I have ideas. The only way that people are going to see them is by me actually building the product and sending it out to mass market. So it's my way of expressing my ideas, my art, and what I want to design. So, and at the end, I think we're just crazy. I love this. I love the challenges. I find it a challenge every day, and it's something to wake up to. So, there's one motto I try to live by when developing, and I sometimes always forget it. I'll hit a challenge, and then I'll have to sit back and think, I need to go back to this motto. I've gone too far down the wrong path. I'm not sure everyone's heard it, but it's keep it simple, stupid. And again, this is important. I used to mentor for art students all the time, and especially with environment art. Their first piece of art, they come back with some crazy concept art. Be like, I want to build this whole scene. Well, that's not possible, especially as you're first starting out. So I try to find pieces in that concept that they actually like. And it's more important for a portfolio to have quality or quantity. So a game in itself is pretty complex with multiple pieces. So one way I look at it is like a puzzle. I break each system down to an individual puzzle piece and then start to connect them together. And then each puzzle piece I break down even further to kind of a 3-step process. I realize it's kind of cutting off. So if you were to compare it to maybe baking a cake, because cakes are delicious, you start out with this. Most of your systems are in here, it's functioning, it's delicious. However, when you go to deliver it to customers or mass market, you normally end up with a response like this. And this is important because many people get discouraged during this stage. You just work your heart out, you're showing it to friends, family, maybe you're putting it up on the store, and you're not getting the reaction you want. So the next step to take it further, don't give up at that point, is maybe giving that feedback and then starting to polish it up a little bit. And at this point, when you go to show people, they may start to understand. They're probably a little bit confused on how everything works, but at least they're starting to get some kind of positive reaction. So then you get the final stage of my favorite. This is when you start connecting all the pieces together, and you get the reaction you want. I guess there's a saying, happy wife, happy life. So yeah, that's just a simple 3-step process I look at. So how does this apply to Galaxy Shield? Well, here are some of the assets I started out with. As you can see, they're not very impressive. If I just ship this, people will be like, what is this product? Then I start to add some polish to it. And I know some engineers are looking at this and going, well, we're not artists, we can't do this. It's important to have an artist on your team. And I think there's actually several art students in the crowd today that got invited. So, socialize after, find an artist, get your project to this stage, it's important. Then when you start to connect all the pieces together, you've got a functioning product that hopefully looks good and plays well. So you may ask yourself, why is this talk called Exploration? Don't you know everything? Simple answer is no, I do not. Not even close. I'm new in this. We are all pioneers, especially in this space and using this technology and hardware. That's why it's important to come to meetups like this, discuss ideas, discuss findings. It was great watching the hackathon talks earlier. And then luckily my boss is not in here. I'm brand new to Unity. I didn't start it until I joined Microsoft, so I'm probably about 6 months in on that engine. Luckily, I've used about 6 engines in the past, so a lot of the systems and theories kind of applied to this. And then, because of all this, I like to learn by doing. It's easy to read forums and theory all day, and you've actually got to physically do something and apply it back. Last thing is, I'm a huge gamer myself. Because I'm tackling this by myself, I wanted to pick a genre that I enjoy playing and figure out how to add a volumetric twist or make it interesting inside the HoloLens. So how's my journey going? Well, I like to look at the HoloLens as a tool or a medium to display what you want in your project. It's not much different, in theory, than a mobile device or a console. You're just building something for the device. So if we compare it to a tool, like an axe or a shovel, that could yield many different results. You could end up digging yourself in a grave, which obviously you don't want to do. Maybe one person over there? Yeah. Or you could have a maintaining, functioning garden, which everyone loves. So here's my steps on how do I try to maintain a garden. First off, I start with a seed. I prototype my idea. And as you're looking at this, you may go, well, Ryan, you said you're an artist. Why does it look like this? Yes, artists even prototype. You don't create final polished assets and just throw them in the game and expect them to work. And if you are doing that, you may want to rethink your process. Why? Because it saves a ton of time. You could actually test your ideas early and see if they work before you get too far in development. And then for me, it also helps identify any issues I may run in down the road. So I could be planning for them early, or even maybe make design decisions to completely avoid them. Second, I think it's extremely important to share your prototype. I'm not sure how many people have been on the HoloLens forum, but I've been documenting every step of the way for the past couple months on this in detail. Why is it important to share your prototype? Well, when you send it out to people, then they actually may have ideas, things you didn't think about that are easy to implement that make the game that much better. And most people are scared to share their prototype because they're afraid someone's going to steal their idea. No one's going to steal your idea. The pros of sharing your prototype versus the cons it outweighs. So don't be worried about someone in the community taking your idea and making it their own. And for me, it provides motivation to take it further. Again, by myself, so I spend 8 hours, I go to bed, I spend 8 hours again, go to bed. Well, when I post on a forum or share my idea, people are encouraging me, which is a huge motivation. And also I find people are more willing or more capable of helping you because they know exactly what you're working on, so when you run into an issue, they know what you may be having an issue with on the project instead of being all secretive about it, which makes it harder for someone to be effective in helping. So this is important, and something I'm actually really bad at during development of HoloLens is always test on the device. You need to verify your project actually works. The one-to-one to Unity is actually pretty great. I haven't run into this issue yet, but it's important. Big thing for me was scale. So I actually developed all my art without testing, finally tested on the device. The top image is me standing about 8 feet away, doesn't even fit in the holographic frame. I'd have to probably be about 20 feet away to make it effective. Luckily this was easy for me to fix because everything's dynamic in my scene under one hierarchy, so I was able to scale it down. But that won't be the case for every project. So you need to test scale. I know some of you guys don't have a device, so one of the hacks that I recommend is modeling out an object that you use every day to realize scale. And if you're using the emulator, place it by your objects. And that way you get a better idea of what you're actually doing. Third one is, not all rooms are the same. A lot of this I did late at night at the Microsoft studio, which our office is 40 by 20 feet. Not everyone has that much space. And then also, not all shapes or rooms are perfectly square. So you kind of need to test and make sure that it's actually going to work in multiple locations. And this is an important one, is holograms are additive light. So what you're seeing in Unity, you're not going to see in the device. Blacks are transparent, and it gets really hard, especially in that lower color range, where it may not show up as bright as you would expect it to. So you need to test it on the device while you're editing your materials. Lastly, you need to make sure it's fun. I'm sure during early mobile days, we've all played the console or PC ports on the mobile phones. It just didn't work. It wasn't a great game. It was a great game on console. It's kind of the case here. You need to make sure the interaction is fun and it's going to work on the device. So I like to say green thumbs help. There's lots of great people at Microsoft doing tons of documentation on the Windows Holographic Dev Center. There's the link. Recommend go there, check it out. The documentation actually gets updated almost every week, if not more. And there's been endless of hours just not writing this documentation, but we actually run people, hundreds of people through user research. So a lot of our conclusions or suggestions are based off that. Worked at smaller studios, there's no way we could get several hundred people to run through, test their game, and efficient, and track all the metrics and provide valuable feedback. However, with that said, some of those are just guidelines. It's important to experiment. Not every project is the same. We were testing on our projects. Because of this, you may find something exciting and new. One case of this is I actually break a rule in Galaxy Shield, and that's a holographic viewing distance. I think we recommend about 1.5 meters at the closest. However, I think it's great in Galaxy Shield that you could step back, see a whole planet, and then you could walk closer and actually see the fine details. Now this works because I'm not forcing it on the user. The user can stop at any point, turn around, step back when they start to get uncomfortable. Here's kind of an example of what I'm talking about. Not the best, it will be much better on the device when you check it out. However, there are some rules you don't want to break. I'm going to leave this up here for a second because this is extremely important and everyone needs to follow it. Just look at it, adjust it. Don't break 60 frames a second. Why is that? Because you may think it's good for you. There was a case in Galaxy Shield early on when I was actually experimenting with higher poly assets and shaders. And when I brought it in, it was running about 35, 40 frames a second. Showed my coworkers, they hated it instantly. Threw it off, wouldn't even play the game, check out the new stuff I added. It's not the same experience for everyone. 60 frames per second provides such a smooth experience. Also, you'll notice the experience degrades below 60 frames a second. Your holograms start to float, stutter, judder. We have all these terms outlined on the documentation, and you don't want any of that. So because of this is a mandate for all our projects. We actually don't ship a project or hand it off to a customer unless it's running at 60 frames a second all the time. So how do we achieve 60 frames a second? Well, it's important to plan the project out early and test it often. Save headaches later. And by that I mean you don't want to start developing, throw a bunch of new systems in, realize it's below 60, and then you've got to debug multiple different things. You're throwing it in constantly, then as soon as it breaks, you can find it and step back that asset or reevaluate what you're working on there. And then you need to realize some items are just not possible, which Chris pointed out. A lot of times with our clients, they have 3D models of their assets or their actual product, and they're millions of polygons. This is never going to work on the HoloLens. So a lot of my job is actually trying to figure out how we could take those assets, crunch them down, and still maintain the fidelity they want within the HoloLens. And this is very easy to break because of the capabilities of the device versus the actual hardware. You're on a Win 10 PC, basically, running DirectX 11, and you're on mobile hardware. So it's easy to get carried away and not realize what you're actually doing. Part of that digging a grave part. So, diving into kind of my pre-planning process. Here's just a simple inspiration board when I started developing Galaxy Shield of different elements I wanted to create. And through this, I looked through the images and I realized that everything needs to be dynamic. I really want you to be able to spin this whole planet. Now, making everything dynamic has a lot of performance implications. I can't static batch anything. I can't pre-compute lighting. So everything needs to be dynamic in single pass. And then I realized that for a tower defense game, you want lots of enemies. This was what makes it more immersive, more fun. It makes it feel like you're actually doing something. So I need to be very careful about my poly count, especially if I'm spawning several hundred characters. The next, vertex skinning is extremely important. So because of this, I actually had a different character idea in mind, and I ended up going with robots because I could segment the mesh and run the animations through rigid animation, which is much more cost effective. And then you need to think about proper spawning techniques. So one thing I'm doing in Galaxy Shield is I actually have my pool of characters already preset it, and I'm running through those, because creating from an instance and destroying actually still keeps some performance implications around in Unity. It's not the best at garbage collecting all that stuff. So, looking at that, I decided to start looking at art styles. How was I going to achieve my vision? And I kind of landed on this polygonal style. Why? Because it's extremely easy to make performant. It's a super simple shader, and little to no lighting is needed. If you actually look in here, not a lot of lighting scenes, maybe one dynamic light in some of them. And it also, you can get away with minimal alpha transparency, which is important because fill rate kills the HoloLens pretty quickly as well. So another win for this was fast production time. I don't have to create any textures, which is a big part of the art process. And it's also a double win because memory footprint. I don't really have to track how much memory I'm using in the HoloLens. I doubt I'll ever actually run out of memory. I'm not sure if you looked at the game Galaxy Shield on the store. It's 15 megabytes. And that's extremely impressive, so I think Unity's base compile is about 13. And for me, I work in realism all day. I could break real world proportions. I could have fun. This is a side project. I want to have fun. And it scales extremely low to high. This is important because I actually plan to port it to other Windows hardware being UWP. So maybe if I want to look at an Xbox One version, I could actually add more polys The style feels the same, feels consistent, but looks good on the device. And luckily for me, it's a very popular art style right now for indie game development. So, I know it'll be accepted by the masses. I'm not taking a risk. So looking at shaders, I mentioned, with this style, you really only need a simple shader. First of all, don't try to reinvent the wheel with the shaders. I'm not sure how many of you guys know about the Holo Toolkit, but we have lots of great examples up there. I do want to point out, however, because I see a lot of people using it, the standard fast is not as fast as the title leads. It's actually just taking the Unity standard shader and trying to make it more efficient. You actually want to be using some of the Lambert or Blendfong or unlit shaders, and you want to build from that. So you want to customize from those shaders. So how do I customize? Well, I started with the Lambert and configurable. I added rim lighting, and I added vertex coloring to it. So as you can see on the right, that's what the base shader provided. This is with me painting some vertex colors in. And then to give it just a final depth and polish, the rim lighting pass. Now this is great because the shader only compiles what you need. Welcome to if-def land. As soon as you open up, you'll realize it. So it's important to follow that template, and I did as well, because there's some objects in my scene that I don't necessarily want vertex coloring or rim lighting on. And this one is nice because it's all single pass. I'm not running multiple passes in there, which again is important for performance. And lastly, this is just a personal workflow thing. Some teams at Microsoft disagree with me. One of the team has something called an Uber shader, where it's actually got every option you'd ever want compiled into one shader in the UI. It's great. I don't find it very effective because I find it hard to edit when I want to go add more code to it. And then also the menu's a mess. So each time I need to go build a material, I find it kind of hard to scroll through the options. So I prefer to work with smaller individual shaders and break them up by use case. So kind of looking at this at the full scene level, here's what the game would look like without any of my edits. And here's with some edits. As you can see, just the rim light adds so much kind of depth to the water, and some of the vertex coloring gives the trees a fake ambient occlusion effect for really cheap. However, this is just a start for me. As you can see, it's kind of overwhelming for me to look at. The list actually never ends. So looking at this, you may seem overwhelmed. I've got some systems in, but I'm not even close to finish. It's okay, because communities are here to help. And if you haven't visited any of these sites, I recommend it. The HoloLens forum is great. Always go to it if you're having an issue with Unity or the HoloLens specifically. And then I find the Unity 3D forums are great for actual Unity issues. Sorry, only go to the HoloLens forum really when you have issues with Unity and the HoloLens gap. However, for just general Unity questions, probably best to go to the Unity 3D forums. Why is that? Well, every time I have an issue with Unity, I go and search, and sure enough, someone else has. Correct answer is already there, and sometimes source code's even posted for me to work from. The Windows Dev Center, it's great, not just for Windows holographic, but also for UWP questions, and how XML files work, and how to manipulate all that stuff. This may seem obvious to most people, but as an artist, I didn't really know about Stack Overflow. It's great. I hate opening Visual Studio. I always have issues with it. Questions already answered on there every time I have an issue. And more importantly, meetups like WinHUGR. It's how you meet fellow enthusiasts. It's how potentially you guys talking can form teams and come up with ideas for a project. So that's kind of the, if you want to take a picture.
Yeah.
It's all over there. But there you go. So that's kind of it for this. Before we get into Q&A, I actually wanted to ask kind of the makeup here. I'm curious how many people actually have HoloLenses or Wave devices? Awesome. And how many people are currently actively developing? Great. And just for my own curiosity, how many are students? It's a good showing. I enjoy it. Awesome. So for this part, I just want to kind of open it up for questions and answers. And then after that, I'll show you the game on the PC. And I know we have devices available, so you can go actually check it out on the device. Any questions?
Have you had a chance to develop an Unreal before?
Have I developed in Unreal?
Specifically for the HoloLens?
Oh, so right now Unreal doesn't support universal apps, so there's really no way to tackle that for the HoloLens currently.
So with the unending to-do list, where do you draw the line and actually test it out to the market?
That is always a tough question. You know, I've got my core systems in, and I know what I want to add, and I guess that would be the line for me, and I think that list was pretty complete. You know, you could always stage. It really depends on a business model that's completely different. I'm not sure budgets first, you know, what your personal thing is. But because this is a personal project, I'm kind of holding on to it longer because I'm not depending on, I guess, making my rent check. So, yes.
The Unity is a great tool for make the whole process easy. But what do you hate about Unity?
Well, I mean, that's starting to get into a little debate, but I think Unity is a great tool. If I had to compare it to something like, say, Unreal, I wish Unity provided better shaders out of the box, or you know, scripting tools that maybe were friendlier to artists. Right now, it's kind of hard to approach if you're used to Unreal and don't know how to use C#. You could use Blueprint. That helps. I've got a list the other way too, but we can go on that later. Yeah.
About design versus development skill set. So, having the design and artist background, do you think that put you in a good place to develop this game for HoloLens? Or do you think you would have been better off starting with development camp? I mean, I know you need a lot of different skills, but are you better suited to develop something for HoloLens if you're a designer or an artist? Or let's say if you're really a developer, you know, do you think you can ship a successful game with having just the development skills?
I think you definitely can, and again, that's where it goes to the pre-planning stage, right? You've got to think about exactly what makes your project successful, capitalize on that, and maybe if you don't have an artist, figure out ways you could download assets or generate a compelling. You still have to have nice visuals at the end of the day. I personally think to make the project compelling to a mass market. You know, if you're working on I guess a specific title for a specific company that's only going to be internal, that probably doesn't matter as much, honestly.
Have you had any specific problems personally, any specific problems with the development side of things?
Yeah, so it actually took me quite a bit to figure out how to get the characters to navigate around the sphere, especially not being a programmer. There's no system out of the box for Unity with sphere navigation, so that probably took a good month for me, with probably one of the engineers over there were tackling it would have been, you know, a couple days.
Did you find that for the creation of art assets, there were any kind of rules that you discovered that you would do the second time around? So like with VR art asset creation, Valve sometimes recommends like for things that are really close, you don't want to use normal maps, you want to use geometry, stuff like that. Did you have any of those things you learned?
Yeah, I mean, AR's, the HoloLens a bit different than that aspect, and I know what you're talking about. I think a lot of it just comes down to experimenting. One hack we actually do in the HoloLens quite often, but again, I broke this rule, is we have shaders set up that will actually fade it nicely, so you know, you can't, if it's a normal map, you can't really go in and see the aliasing and first geometry. I will say, for the HoloLens, using more mesh over higher res textures that require more passes like normal maps, it's probably better to go back to more mesh, which kind of goes back to my GameCube days of development. So.
What's like the feature that you wish the HoloLens had that it doesn't have currently? Like the biggest one that you like, it's kind of lacking.
Well, as a Microsoft rep, I don't think I could go into that as much. I would say maybe one thing is you know, eye tracking support, which I know is kind of what everyone requests. So, and that just because things you deal with, like when you're working on UI interfaces, it sometimes could be tedious to do that, but there's design ways around that. So it's all about thinking about that in the design process.
Two things. Do you have a Twitter handle, or are you active on Twitter? Can we follow you?
I am not a Twitter. I actually have a Twitter, but you'll see there hasn't been a post in it in like 3 years.
Okay.
I'm a Facebook guy.
All right, no problem. And number two, do we have a place where we can look for that frame rate that you were talking about? How we can monitor that?
Yeah, WebD has actually, if you log into the web portal interface, actually has a really good kind of tracking tool on that. Or you could, through Unity, which I'm sure the engineers will help answer this, you could actually, we do it a lot through voice command, show FPS, and we'll enable it on and off with the voice command so you could actually track it from the device right there.
You've gone over rules for engineering, rules for design. What about interaction, user interaction?
Yeah, so I mean that's definitely the pioneer space. And again, it's different for every project. It seems like I try to make these rules and I document them internally, but the next project I work on is completely breaking those rules. At the end of the day, I think it's just about testing and iteration on what's comfortable. There are some hard guidelines in there, and again, I would go on the documentation site and kind of flip over those because they're great general rules.
What industry do you see adopting HoloLens?
So I mean, it's short term. I think it's definitely not consumer. It's more enterprise, and that's why we're focusing that. But you know, AR VR is a huge market. I think they're predicting by 2020 there's going to be 80 million devices on the market. So I see it growing. But short term, if you're trying to make money and developing for it, I think enterprise is definitely the better space for HoloLens.
What enterprises? Is it manufacturer? Is it medical? Is it construction?
It is everything.
Everything.
There's a great partners video, as I mentioned. This was the agency one, posted on the Microsoft HoloLens discussion or YouTube page. That's well worth kind of checking out because it goes over some more of that. But yeah, it's every kind of field we've entered in, it's been massive. So.
I haven't had the opportunity to use HoloLens yet, but one of the critiques that I hear is that the field of view is fairly small. Therefore, in gaming, as opposed to using a VR headset or something like that, it isn't the same experience because it's like, oh, I can't see as much. But I haven't used one yet, so I haven't generated my own opinion. I'm just curious what your opinion is.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously you hear that a lot. I think a lot of it has to do with the design and kind of keeping that in mind. You know, when I'm going through the academy, especially with the sharing class you mentioned, one of the first things they mention is the field of view, and this is press that, you know, will grill you at anything you say. But as soon as they get in and start playing it, it's not an issue anymore. Why? Because we designed for it. So you've just got to put that in the design, and I think once your eyes adjust and you start interacting, you know, it's a great experience, and you kind of start to filter that out.
So how close is the accuracy in terms of what you see on the device versus the HoloLens emulator?
As far as what?
On the device versus the HoloLens emulator.
Oh, it's pretty close. You're missing one big thing that I kind of mentioned in my talk, though, is that holograms are additive. You know, so it's kind of really hard to get that final vision. There's a lot of times, especially coming from the game space, where I like to make my scenes very dark and kind of moody. It doesn't work as well in the HoloLens, which is another reason why you see bright, colorful things on my globe. So.
Yeah, how complex would it be to create a custom gesture or something that doesn't come out of the box?
That one would probably have to be one of the guys over there. I think right now we don't recommend it or suggest doing it, but.
Is there a reason for that?
What?
What's the reason for that?
That part I do not know. I think that's above my pay grade.
Yeah. So I saw your inspiration slide. I was wondering if there's anything that you've seen other people do or that you did in your project at early stages that helps out build a great product.
So sorry, as far as what specifically?
So in the early stages before you start developing,
yeah.
Was there something that you did outside of that slide that you showed with the
Yeah, so I mean, basically that's just a slice of what I had compiled. You know, I've got a massive folder at home of just inspiration and kind of different games that I play. And there's some games that I haven't played that seem parallel, so I'll actually dive in and start playing those and gathering notes for that. You know, I don't want to spend a lot of time concepting this out in my spare time. I kind of already had a really good idea what I want to do in my head, so it's just kind of getting things that reinforce it, that were successful in the market, so I know I'm not veering too far off the path and going crazy with it.
Any advice for submitting to the store to get it in the HoloLens area?
Yeah, I mean, I know some people have had issues with that looking on the forum. For me, for whatever reason, it was pretty straightforward. I would definitely have a detailed description. And right now, if you're trying to just do holographic, make sure that you have the holographic option marked and nothing else, because that actually passes submission a lot easier. If you start getting into the Windows thing, then they'll start checking for touch gestures on screens that you never wanted support. So I'd say those two, detailed description, and you know, make sure if you're just HoloLens, only submit HoloLens.
And also a good post, get sticky posts to the projects. Go through everything.
Was there anything, while you were developing your app, was there anything that you learned that you wish, you know, HoloLens had that capability that I wouldn't have to do it myself, or I wish I had that capability as part of your HoloLens?
I mean, I didn't really find anything lacking that I pulled from the kit yet. I would say one thing to stay away from that was an issue for me is, I know we're kind of looking at this, is the gaze stabilizer. It was a lot more expensive than I thought, and it ended up being a huge issue for me in the end without much result. So that, but most of the stuff that I'm doing here, like the shaders, I plan on actually submitting to the kit.
Developer who is primarily an artist, have you ever tried Playmaker? Do people even use it in the industry? Because we of course. So I'm just wondering.
So remind me what Playmaker is. I guess that answers the question.
It's kind of like blueprints for Unity. It's a development tool for non-developers.
Yeah, so I haven't checked that out. I mean, if it works, it works. You know, the biggest thing there is making sure that it's compiling code that's semi-performant. Kind of going back to the KISS rule, you know, no one will see that back end, but as long as it's running at 60 frames a second and looks good, you're golden.
Does the emulator, or can you get the emulator to walk to the performance of the device? So like on whenever my emulator, I'm running on NVIDIA high-end hardware, but I'm not sure that the emulator is actually emulating the GPU and making sure that 60 frames on the emulator is getting 60 frames on the device.
I'm looking at you, Dave. Okay, there you go. That one I don't know. That would actually be a great question for the forum that we could have our engineers dig into and get your proper answer on. How we doing?
What are your favorite tower defense games?
Sorry, what?
Favorite tower defense games?
I'm completely drawing a blank on the name right now. It was actually in my slide.
I think I recognize 3 of them, but I'm curious, you know, this inspiration and the drawing of
Yeah. Let's go back all the way. It is this one. If anyone could call it out, extra credit.
Kingdom Rush.
Bam! Yes. Sorry about that. I think we got 1 or 2 more questions.
What's the holographic app that you've used that you kind of had the most like object presence with, or that you felt like the most immersed in?
I would say Fragments wins that award. It kind of blew my mind the first time I played it. I just moved from San Francisco actually, so to see my high-rise apartment turn from a nice high-rise apartment to a crack den in New Orleans, I think it was quite stellar. Other than that, I'd recommend, I know they're launching it at the Kennedy Space Center, is the Destination Mars experience. That's a really great example of how to do installment with the HoloLens. They actually built out a custom room. They had lighting go match. They had external surround sound. It was pretty mind-blowing.
Is that going to be on the store, the Destination Mars one?
No, that's actually like a custom installment for NASA. I think they're launching at the Kennedy Space Center, and then they plan to maybe do some others. I don't know. I haven't checked the news. Cool. So one last little bit, because I know Dwayne's going to be handing out HoloLenses for people who haven't checked it out. I kind of just wanted to show the game and the flow for it. It's only one level, and there's a lot of systems missing right now. But as you can see, since I'm deciding to support other things, it actually works on Windows with touch and everything. So you've got your planet. I need to move it over. This is going to be really, see what we could do here real quick. All right, it's a little big on there, but we'll deal with it. So you've got your planet, and you'll be able to spin it around by tapping and dragging. And then you've got your tower spots right here. So you've got your menu, and there's 4 different tower types. So once you're done building towers, there's no currency system. I'm tracking it right now, but I don't actually have it hooked up, mainly because I wanted people to test out different towers before they got bored with it. So once you get your towers built, then you can go ahead and send in your wave of enemies. And they start coming out, and that's kind of the basic principle. And if you want to let some guys run through, give it a second, scroll on it. Again, this is kind of the part I was talking about, being able to zoom in and see everything up close. Takes a while to get around there. But as any mechanic, I actually have them start to dig in the core of the planet, and if enough get through, then the planet blows up. And I'm still working on making the blow up part look a little bit better, but that's, you know, the challenge with the HoloLens and staying performant. So you can see him kind of jumping in there and drilling in. So, awesome. And then from there it reloads and